Hi, I'm Derek, and this is going to be kind of a Louis Rossmann style video. And if you can see it, I apologize for my sweatiness. I want to talk about the Sony Alpha 7S III and how Sony's firmware updates bricked the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on older cameras. Also, Sony's firmware is set up in such a way that you cannot reinstall old firmware versions. So this isn't like a graphics driver where you can just roll back to the old one if the new one is causing problems. I bought this Alpha 7S III in February of 2021. It shipped with the ability to see what the camera is seeing, change settings, change what's in focus, take photos, and start and stop recordings wirelessly from your phone. Of course, I found this feature very useful, but it was disabled on this camera after I installed firmware version 3.00 in March of 2024. If you do some searching on the internet, you'll find several posts on Reddit, forums, and Sony's community website about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi being disabled by this firmware version. I can't find it now, but I remember either someone sharing an email from Sony or Sony releasing a statement that said, the new firmware is more sensitive to hardware defects in the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi module. Basically saying that your camera was already defective and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi used to work because the old firmware was, I guess, willing to run the defective hardware, and it worked? I don't know. This doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think anyone is buying that logic, if you can call it logic. I think plenty of people understand how manufacturing supply chains work for this type of product, and we can reasonably guess that at some point during the chip shortage of 2020 to 2023, Sony used different hardware. Or Sony just changed the hardware for later cameras. Even Google's AI overview agrees with this theory. Anyway, in late 2024 and early 2025, I started seriously considering doing the repair to this camera. There is a known repair that works, which is replacing the main circuit board. I got a quote from a company called New High Tech Electronics, but the cost was going to be $800 for the part and $240 for labor. So, put another $1,040 into this camera just to get it working the way it should be. I hesitated to do this because I also contacted Sony, and the representative that emailed me back said they hope to resolve this issue with future firmware updates. I didn't want to pay $1,040 for a repair and then find out that a free firmware update fixed the problem. Firmware version 4.00 was released in April of 2025. I installed it, and it still didn't fix the problem. In May of 2025, I decided to pay a whole $2,500 more than the cost of the repair to buy a second Alpha 7S III. This way, I could have a camera body with all of the functions it's supposed to have and keep the old one just in case a future firmware update does restore the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth functionality. Also, having two cameras is often very useful, and it's nice to have them both be the same model instead of using my phone as the second camera. Firmware version 5.00 was released in February and 5.01 was released in May of this year, 2026. Can you guess? Can you guess whether or not these firmware versions finally restored full function to my older Alpha 7S III? Well, would I be making this video if one of these versions did? Neither of them did. So, I think Sony needs to fix this. I think they should do one of three things. 1. Release a software tool or something to allow customers to revert their older cameras back to earlier firmware versions. 2. Release new firmware that actually fixes the problem. Or 3. Provide affected customers with a free repair. And I think if they do not take any of these actions, a class action lawsuit should be brought against them. In my opinion, this camera is still one of the best options in its price range for capturing images and time lapses of the night sky. It's full frame with a sensor resolution just a bit bigger than 4K. That means it has big pixels and hopefully also more distance between the interconnects in the chip that reads the sensor. Both of these should result in better signal to noise, which would be most noticeable in low light. It's also fairly ubiquitous amongst digital content creators and can output raw video through HDMI. Today, it's still Sony's flagship camera with this sensor size and resolution. And now it costs $500 more than it did a year ago. In October of this year, this model will be 6 years old. I guess it's kind of nice that in almost 6 years of production, Sony has only hiked the price one time, but it also feels weird that people buying it today have to pay more for a nearly 6-year-old camera model. Imagine paying the same or more for a 6-year-old iPhone model that was manufactured this year. The only difference I see on these two camera bodies besides the serial numbers is a number on the bottom that ends in 1 on the old body and 2 on the new one. Okay, that's all I have for this video. Do you agree that something should be done about this? Or do you think customers should have to pay $1,040 to restore functionality that firmware broke just because this camera is out of warranty? Thank you so much for watching. Ugh.